WN going celebration of kissing Lord Stanley's Cup and almost dropping it on the floor along with Barry Trotz and my wife at a party at about 3 o'clock in the morning East Coast time at the Mandarin Oriental on Las Vegas Boulevard. The Boulevard of Broken Dreams has somehow been fixed. And this guy has been my friend for, quite frankly, as long as Barry Trotz has been my friend. We met right around the same time. Barry Trotz used to sit up in the press box as a Western scout along with Jack Button, and then became the assistant to the assistant coach, and then the assistant coach, then the head coach. And this guy was a season ticket holder in Section 210, 212 for many, many years. I would go down and sit with the fans when I covered the Skipjacks back in the late 80s, especially once they became the red, white, and blue capital Skipjacks. Howard Scher went on to become the founder and head coach of UMBC hockey. He is still playing in men's leagues and has been a coach in the area. He's been my friend for 30 years, as well as my partner in DJ and lifer hockey pal, and sometimes Monday night wing eater and beer drinker. Howard Scher joins us now to basically just be my pal and talk about the Stanley Cup. Howie, I don't know where you were when I had that Skipjacks jersey on and Trotzy grabbed the cup and went walking out and found Ovechkin and said, "I want the cup," and brought it over. But it was a surreal evening. I only wish that there was a video camera on the whole thing so you could watch it with some sort of glee. But at least, Howie, there is some evidence, and I will have you know that we are bringing the Stanley Cup to Baltimore, and you get VIP treatment that night, just like you did back in 1998 when we had it in the studio.
That is right. I've been telling that story quite a bit the last few days. That was a good time. I never envisioned that we'd be raising it in victory as a fan all these years later, but thanks for having me on.
Well, I guess what does it mean to you is where it starts, and I wrote this long, wordy, breathy thing about why I love hockey, and I don't know why I'm the only one in Baltimore media who's ever loved hockey. I don't, other than Jeff Rimmer coming through for 15 minutes, and, every now and again somebody, showing up at a game, I'm the guy who loves hockey. I always go back to, what made you love hockey? You're just a kid from Northwest Baltimore. You weren't sort of born in Quebec with skates on or whatever. I don't even know. I met you in the Middle Concourse in 1980, and there were 28 of us, and me
right.
and you and your dad and Joe DeFonso, and obviously, people like Jeff Amder, who's my Facebook friend, who went to the Nationals game to see the Cup paraded out on Saturday before the fiasco broke loose with the boys and the fountains and the Cup and all that stuff. But Skippers on the Warpath, go, and Gene Ubriaco and I sitting in Michael's Cafe 2 Fridays ago singing the Skipjacks fight song, the Clippers fight song together. This has been a glorious little thing for me in my 50th year on the planet, Howard, to fall in love with hockey and people like you and all the people that have amassed through hockey through all of these years. It all comes full circle when you're sitting on the strip kissing the Stanley Cup, man.
Right, I can only imagine. I mean, you use the word surreal. I mean, it's totally surreal. It's some of these videos I've been watching have actually made it seem more real because it's just felt like it really didn't happen.
It's not just that it happened, people cared, right? Part of your association to hockey is we were the nerds in the corner. Even you as a coach, you playing a club. This isn't UMBC's basketball team or Pete Caringi's soccer team. This is you slapping a logo on and trying to put a club team together because no one would take hockey seriously at UMBC or anywhere else here. And, I guess over the last 30 years, that's been my relationship. The really weird part for me is having a son who loves it, a wife who loves it, a daughter-in-law who loves it, their friends who love it, people who never loved it before. At least they loved it last week, right? I don't know what the upshot of all of this is and whether it's sort of a flash that 10 years from now hockey won't be any bigger and better once Ovechkin's gone. I often wonder that about the Ravens when Flacco and Ray Lewis are gone. What will that be if they turn into the Cleveland Browns around the corner? But at least for now, the really neat part of this is people really dig hockey, Howard. Finally, it only took all of our lives, right? Literally.
Yeah. I mean, it's unbelievable the text messages I was getting from people throughout the playoffs, and when they won the championship the other night, congratulating me. I mean, it's people are paying attention to hockey that barely knew it existed before. And the ratings tell a huge story. And I think it's going to be interesting to see what happens in Baltimore now. I mean, maybe this opens the door for another minor league team to consider coming back to the city. I mean, maybe the excitement suddenly generated here again. It really is. It's truly amazing, the response we've seen. And I love the fact I can practically go anywhere now and talk to somebody about hockey because there's such a buzz about it right now.
Howard Scher is our guest. He has been my hockey lifer buddy and hockey mate, my one-time DJ partner in the 1990s. He has produced my radio programs in the 90s, has sat in as a producer back in the day, talking sports with me when I was starting my career back in 1992, 93, 94 at WITH and WLG, before we even had a WNST to go rummaging around and chasing down the Stanley Cup. Howard, I met you during that era. What made you love hockey then? You skated, right? Like early on, you went to Northwest and you played some hockey. I was a roller skater. That skated backwards to chase girls. And, I met my mother's,
right.
My son's mother at Skateland, so I was a roller skater. I put ice skates on and went up to Patterson Park every once in a while. I wasn't very good at ice skating. I never, as a kid, I became a better ice skater as an adult to play a little bit of pickup hockey here and again, which I love doing. I almost feel cheated that I didn't grow up on some farm in Ottawa and play hockey as a kid because I think I would have loved that more than baseball or basketball or even tennis, which I loved and I still played, and I love yoga now, as you know, as I get to age and be older. But there's nothing I love more than watching hockey and being around the team. And I know I expressed this to you when you brought your daughter out for one of the Penguins games a couple of weeks ago. We got together out at Michael's Cafe, and I think I told you the thing I love about being around the players is the character and the integrity of the players and the honesty of the players. And part of jumping in the fountain drunk and acting like idiots that's part of like their sort of unabashed unguardedness that hockey players sort of have in some way, that they're like regular dudes, you know what I mean? And it
right.
means that much to them that they wanted to dance around half naked in the fountain because that's the kind of celebration that they were feeling at the time.
It's you asked like what attracted me to hockey back when I first started watching it. And yes, I played a little bit of roller hockey, very little ice hockey originally, then started skating, but it wasn't even that. It was just the excitement of the game, the constant pace, and what you just alluded to, like the camaraderie between the players, I think even transcended into the stands. Like everybody that sat at those games basically had like a clique they got into. Like it was a group of fans that had the same common interests. They sat around each other and they cheered each other on or rooted for the team together. And
we sat in the body section, and I literally covered the team for the Evening Sun with a notebook because we didn't have Twitter back then. I didn't write until the whole game was over with. I didn't file running copy. I wasn't working on a deadline. I literally came down and sat with you guys and talked about the games with you. I mean, like literally we watched the games with our eyes open. We saw penalties. We disputed penalties. There were no replays, right? Like, so we all kind of you had to keep an eye on the game back then because you didn't have a replay. And that was something that when I went to Caps games, you were kind of spoiled because we had little TV monitors up there with Home Team Sports, and they did a great job of covering the game. You would always get a replay, but Skipjack games weren't that way. You had to keep your eye on the flying puck, right? And the Black & Decker Industrial Power Tool Power play. Yes.
Yep.
Yeah. So I remember all that stuff, and it's all
it was definitely it's different than watching it today. I mean, I was at one of the games against Tampa and on the Caps run, and if there was something I wasn't sure about what happened, because from my seat I didn't have a video replay always if they didn't show it on the screen, so I would get on the Twitter and I'd find out what the beat writers were saying about the play because they had the monitors. And, so it was a different thing back then, but it was something about it. Something about the pace of the game, the camaraderie.
Even in a totally empty, dingy arena where it literally was like a scene out of like literally Major League 2 or, like the goofy 12 fans that sit in left field rooting for a last place. Like people that go to Orioles games this week, as an example. Like those.
Right.
That sort of lonely out in the wilderness feeling. that we always had. And look, I'll talk to Doug McClain this week on the air. I'll have Gene Ubriaco. You can go to the BioToyota.com audio vault. And, maybe you could talk a little bit about Gene Ubriaco and Doug McClain and Terry Murray and then Barry Trotz, because it was a revolving cast of characters as head coaches then. Jack Button is not here to talk about it, and I will probably talk to Doug about what kind of a job. It wasn't a very good job, and Barry sort of aspired up the ladder to get that job as a very young guy at that point who didn't coach in the league and was a scout and all that. That was a big job for Barry Trotz to get that Skipjacks job.
Right. I mean, for one thing, the AHL was the top of the minor leagues, but Baltimore was a big city. So even though it wasn't a desirable job, you were so far south in the old AHL that you spent most of your life on buses. But you were coaching in a big city, so there was a little bit more exposure. There was an NHL team just down the road. I mean, there was, any way you look at it.
And they had good players. The Capitals had a decent farm. They tried to win, and it was important to Tom Ebright that they had a good team, especially after the fiasco in the Ubriaco that final year when they were unaffiliated in 87-88, that once the Caps came in those 4 years, they had 4 different coaches. I've forgotten about Robbie Laird and his sort of surliness. And I always got along with Doug McClain, but Barry was kind of a special bright light. Barry was a different kind of a guy, a much more upbeat guy than any of the predecessors, a much younger guy. And I don't know that I ever sat there thinking that 30 years later I'd be sitting at his table in the corner with the greatest player on earth dropping the Stanley Cup off on the table. Like, I just don't know that I ever thought about that with you up in Section 212, man.
It was probably the farthest thing from your mind. I mean, seriously. I mean, we would have been happy to win a Calder Cup.
The year the Ubriaco had the Sherbrooke Canadians, that was close. And
83, I think.
Yeah, and of course the Trotz won the Calder Cup with all the same players the next year up in Portland, Maine with the Portland Pirates, and then of course lost that Calder Cup that we've talked so much about, the bottle of champagne from 1995. And Howard Scher is my guest. He was my hockey friend. He's been my lifer hockey pal. He's the founder of the UMBC hockey program, as well as still playing in men's leagues and coaching these many years later. All right, for you with this team and what made this team special from a tactical hockey standpoint, look, they've always been good enough to win the Cup, Howie, right? I mean, why they won it this year, I don't know, but I'm old enough to have remembered, and I shared a great, long conversation with Tom Boswell as we waited for the Stanley Cup to be presented the other night about the Orioles from 79, 80, 81, 82, 83, finally winning with sort of a graybeard collection of Jim Palmer and a young Cal Ripken and all that. Boy, the Kuznetsov takes that role there, and the graybeards involved with Ovechkin and Backstrom and Holtby and Beagle and this group of guys that's been together for such a long period of time. This was really a special run in a lot of ways, but the fact that they did do it with such an incredible core of familiar faces to so many in the fan base, as well as Barry Trotz from 30 years ago for the old school guys with Poyle and Button and guys that you and me and Eddie Frankovic and other people were familiar with, for the Craig Laughlin's and the Al Kokins that have been associated with this for so long. I think there was really a tying together here that I don't know that any book could do it justice, man.
Yeah, I think this team was, they were committed to winning. There wasn't, obviously there's a leader in Ovechkin, the greatest player on ice arguably today. But there was a lot of balance on this team. A lot of guys bought in. They played a smart defensive game. And I mean, you could see the difference in Ovechkin. And then all you need to do is take a look at the statistics for the game-winning goals for the playoffs. The Capitals literally have like 6 guys in the top 15 in the NHL. Now, granted, they played more games, but the balance, you've got Eller on the list, Devontae Smith-Pelly,
19 guys scored goals.
But Verana's on the list. I mean, they spread the wealth, and they played as a team. And, and what I've seen the last days, I should say the days after they won the Cup, what I saw is a team that is, these guys genuinely seem to like each other. I mean, they're jumping in fountains together. They're singing "We Are the Champions" together. I mean, at a Nats game. I mean, these guys really, really like each other, and I think things fell into place, and it's a bunch of guys that like each other. They play hard. They have the talent. And, who's to say what happens next year? I mean, they could be right back there again.
Do you have a favorite Cap, through this era? You always sort of like that third line. I thought Brett Connolly was going to score the game winner, and he sort of kind of did, with help with Lars Eller. It always comes back to that John Druce, right? Or that, in our era, that Chris Felix sort of hardworking guy. Did you ever play? I mean, it's easy to love Jay Beagle, right? I mean, you don't need to be an Ovechkin or a Backstrom fan or think TJ Oshie's cute or whatever to like any of these players, but they're almost like the Beatles, right? Like on those championship teams, you're allowed to love Jacoby Jones, even if he only appears once in a while in a cameo role, right?
Right. I mean, look, there's two players that come to mind, and for different reasons. Like during the championship run, it was Devontae Smith-Pelly. I mean, he made mistakes early on in the playoffs, but that guy was there every time they needed a goal. You could see the emotion from him when he'd make a bad play. He'd go to the bench and he would bang his fist. I mean, this guy, he's basically a relatively new Cap, and I just like the effort he brought, and he came through, and, he's a guy that bought himself probably or played himself into a very large contract in the offseason. So he's probably one season in Washington and done. But, the other guy is, and it's for a different reason than most people are going to say, but I'm going to tell you it's Tom Wilson. And when I sat there at that Tampa game 2 weeks ago, you see a different perspective when you're in the stands, as you know, because you go to a lot of these games and you do on TV. And Tom Wilson is in the right place at the right time almost all the time. He really, that guy...
Well, it helps when you're playing with the best player on earth, too. I mean, that does elevate a game, and it elevated everybody around Lemieux, especially when he was distributing. But part of that is being able to put the biscuit in the basket, being able to throw an elbow, being able to protect your guy, being able to hold the body down, being able to have the kind of strength to pull a stick or pull a body a little bit more than somebody that's not that strong, and also having that toughness that sort of comes when you see the 4 and the 3 skating at you.
Correct. And, on the penalty killing, I mean, it's just one of these things. I hate to keep using the word unsung hero or referring to people like that, but that's really, he gets credit for certain things, but you have to have the full defensive responsibility and be in the right spot at the right time and play good positioning in hockey to be successful. And, one of the things that Ovechkin was known for many years was the fact that he was never in the right spot when he needed to be. And here's Tom Wilson at 23 years old, who is pretty much always in the right spot. Now, granted, he's not a prolific goal scorer at this point in his career like Ovechkin was at that age. But, I just think you need to have guys like this on your team. So I enjoy watching him. And, yeah.
Sort of last thing for you, the breaking up of the band is always around the corner, right? Like the Blackhawks have endured that, the Kings have endured that. You better enjoy this because I don't know that there's any sustained period where you're going to think you're going to win the Stanley Cup 3 out of the next 4 years. Certainly with this kind of talent, with where they are, whether Trotz comes back or not, and that sort of remains to be seen, and I hope they sort that out sooner than later, in most cases, that this is a limited time offer, right? And, and this is rarefied air. And much like when the Cubs win, or even when the Red Sox won the first time, not knowing there'd be 2 or 3 or 4 more down the line, you better celebrate accordingly. This is special. It is different. And I don't, envision that there's going to be another one of these around the corner. I hope there is. I pray there is. But I don't feel like it's a birthright by any stretch of the imagination. I
agree. And like I said before, I feel like a lot of things went right for them. They got the right bounces. As Barry Trotz always says, the hockey gods were looking down on them, and it really was the case. I mean, but, it happens to every team when you go on a championship run, so nothing is given. I mean, this may be it for years, and at this point, the Caps farm system is pretty weak. So, Ovechkin's getting up there in age, Backstrom's starting to get up there, and, these guys, in a salary cap area, it's hard to say what's going to happen with the team. So, you do have to enjoy it, and you have to relish the fact that the guys are loving it as much as they are when you see these videos.
Howard Scher is my guest. He's been my lifer hockey pal. We met at a Baltimore Skipjacks game at the then Baltimore Civic Center, then Baltimore Arena, now the Royal Farms Arena, where I got my Rofo coffee cup rocking out here on our Facebook Live, as well as our YouTube WNSTV channel. Well, Howie, we've been at it a long time, and you and I go back to, we met when the Colts had already left town. We go back to the miracle of ever drinking a beer in a parking lot for an NFL game in this city and watching Camden Yards get built. I believe you and I went to a couple of Orioles games as younger people out on 33rd Street after we became friends in the late 80s into the early 90s. So we have certainly seen a lot of things, but you have now seen well into the morning at 4 a.m. me taking pictures in a Skipjacks jersey with a real Stanley Cup and a real Skipjacks coach and a real Capitals coach and a real Stanley Cup in Las Vegas kissing the cup. Pinch me, I can die now, okay?
I know. I'm with you. I feel the same way. It's amazing. It is. It's surreal.
I only wish you were there for Game 5 to join me. That would have only
made
it more miraculous. I know you were on the fence on that one, so, hopefully I took a little piece of Section 212 and the Death Dogs and the delicious French fries with me out to Las Vegas.
You did.
He is Howard Scher. He's been my pal for years and years, and, hopefully I find you on the parade route somewhere, Howie.
All right, buddy. Thank you very much.
Howard Scher, the founder of the UMBC club hockey team and a men's hockey player and coach, and my lifer friend, now going on 30-some years we've been together, as well as having a DJ business together. He was an early producer of mine back at WITH and answering phones and talking sports with me. So good to chat with my pals. I'm hoping to round up all of my pals who love hockey this week to talk hockey with you, including a bunch of former coaches for the Skipjacks and the Clippers and other places, and scouts and former Skipjacks and former players and media folks and people that love Barry Trotz and people that kiss the Stanley Cup. It's been a crazy, crazy ride. It feels like I'm in the Twilight Zone. It really does. Nasty at WNST.net finds me. Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Snapchat, Instagram. Streaming live on our Facebook as well as our YouTube WNSTV channel. Don't forget, Dennis Colatzos is here on Thursday driving you home. It is the SSV on WNST. And, of course, Coons Ford brings you our WNST tech service. They sponsor all of that, and all the breaking news you get first out on the WNST tech service. It's all brought to you by Coons Ford of Security Boulevard. Our morning newspaper ships directly to your email inbox free of charge, and all powered up by our friends at Planet Fitness and PlanetFitness.com, where it's still $10 a month to get in the best shape of your life, guaranteed. Also, the Maryland Jockey Club and the Laurel entries in the morning newspaper, as well as on the front of WNST.net each and every day, as we roll out and talk a lot of horse racing here this week as Justify and Bob Baffert. The Triple Crown at Belmont, what a week it was. I mean, from the Triple Crown and the Golden State Warriors and obviously the Caps, the loss of Anthony Bourdain, which I haven't even gotten a segment to, but I will. I'm doing all sorts of hockey stuff. I wrote a great blog out at WNST.net called Kissing the Stanley Cup in Las Vegas with Barry Trotz and bringing it to Baltimore. I hope you read it. It's my life and love of hockey, and I'll probably be reading it at some point on the air here this week as I button down for all things champagne, bringing the cup to Baltimore, parades, all that good stuff ahead, as well as my Dear Orioles series, which you'll get a piece of later in the week. I am Nestor. We are WNST.net, AM 1570, and WNST, Towson, Baltimore, and we never stop talking Baltimore sports.